Greetings.
See you.
Greetings. Good seeing you. But it can be really whenever we show up. That's, I guess, part of it. However, plus for those that can't come, I do try to record it, even though if you've ever looked at my YouTube videos, they usually don't show anything except like the dust balls on the floor. And you might be able to hear it. The battery might run out, and you might only get 6 minutes out of an hour and a half class.
Great.
However, there's multiple repeats because I've done this class, and I'm pretty much the same all the time. Do you think a person who is fluent in a language also understands and can communicate better than someone who's not as fluent? That's what that means, right?
I mean,
Hypothetically.
yeah. I think
I think that's what fluency means. Yeah. They also understand it better. And the way you achieve fluency is by immersion or volume, basically. Quantity of speaking, reading, writing, reading. I said that. Listening, I didn't say that. So the more volume you have of the language, the more you become fluent. It's just like exercise. Where some people pick it up faster than others, but still the main thing is volume. So when I grade by volume. Does that sound terrible? I mean, I should be looking for quality as well as quantity, but I figure quality comes with quantity. So when I get your essays, I check properties. If there's enough words there, A for that. And then I read it, right? That's okay.
That was the hardest essay I'd ever written.
But it shouldn't be. It should be fun. It should be fluid, basically. Why is this like totally?
I wondered because the room next door, I had the class already this morning,
That's on.
and it wasn't working. So.
No kidding.
Bathroom?
Is it working now?
Yeah, I was just in that class.
Yeah.
Or
They might
I
have
guess
gotten-
the one over.
Aha.
220.
218.
Oh no, then yeah, it was 220.
I
It's
got
rock
my
and roll.
mixed up for a second there.
It's all good.
Okay, that's what I need.
This looks promising though.
No, I don't want to do that. So for some of you, we haven't met, excuse me, before. I recognize, I think everybody actually. Have all of you taken a course with me before? A couple not. So I'll do my, sorry for the répéter la phrase kind of thing. So I'm Bill. You could actually call me whatever you like except late for dinner. Right, that's a joke. If you really want to, you could call me Herr Professor, but that's just dumb, so don't do that. That's actually me. A friend of mine named Rembrandt painted that of me when I was much older than I am today, so that's fun. You've heard that line before. It's actually a merger of my face and the Rembrandt. So, and it's called The Philosopher. So that's just hilarious too. And Joseph Butcher was the person who merged that for an art class and gave it to me, so that was fun. But that was my face at the time. Put it on, so that's fun. But so this is my main webpage. Notice it's WSJAMISON. Had a lot of folks leaving out the S, and when they do that, they go to my son's email address. He's W.H. Jamison, but they didn't. The university, in its infinite wisdom, deleted his H. So he's just W. Jamison. But if you email W. Jamison, he gets it. And then politely forwards it and says, "Hey, Dad, I think this is for you." It's nice. I get other things for him. I got an art book in my box yesterday for Professor Jamison. I love art, but I don't teach art, so I gave it to him. It's his. That's weird. But so this is fun. You have links, of course, all to the university, the Middle College, if you're associated with that, the Department of Philosophy, which is fantastic. They're all brilliant except for me.
Okay.
It's one of those weird things. I don't know how that happened. Actually, I was grandfathered in. I've been here 24 years, and they're all like younger than that, basically. They're my son's age, actually. I think the world's trying to tell me you should retire now, but I don't do that ever. That's weird. So these are links to my various syllabi. This is the one we're in, Early Modern. This is the semester. There are at least one change. There is at least one change that I have to make. We're being our accreditation committee is re-accrediting. We're already credited. That's not a problem. But they're like doing their 10-year annual. Can't be annual if it's 10. Decimal, whatever, workup. And so they're going to be here in October. And the one thing everybody is worried about, that's scared, everybody's worried about is that the student outcomes on your syllabus are exactly right. And so actually we're inventing them because we didn't have them really. So I made up my own, but now the department has them and they're on the database. And so they have to be exactly the same. And I just got the email the other day from Stephanie saying, "Oh, I've got like 3 words wrong in the third. I have to have demonstrate something instead." So I've got it. I just have to update it downtown because the machine I use to maintain the website is in the admin building. And so I have to drive there and go and do that before it will be right. So there will be a change in the third line there for student outcomes. Does it bother you that I ended up messing up the font? And so it's small, it's large, small. That doesn't bother me. Nobody's
No, I do.
autistic and annoyed enough that, that feather's out of place, on the bird. It just annoys some people.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is they've released the final dates for the final, and that has to be right too, even though it's not mandatory for you to come to mine because by then everything will be done. I don't have a final exam. Everything is sent to me. But I will be here because it's mandatory for me to actually be here for the full amount, which is why they get into like 11:34. I'll probably be here more like 11:30 all the time because it's an evener number.
I thought that was a typo.
Yeah, I don't know what the heck we're thinking, if it could be that we have 30 meetings and one of the meetings that we're supposed to meet, so we only end up with 29, but that would mean they want to add more, not decrease it. So I don't know what they're thinking. They are thinking, I'm sure of that, but I'm not sure what. So I'll change a couple of the things. The syllabus is really otherwise a pretty good outline of what I intend to cover. And notice, even though the course is called Early Modern, and when we did, it used to be called History of Philosophy 2, which I think I have. Notice I put that
Yeah, it's at the
out
top.
of habit. I thought, I'm going to make sure you knew that that's originally what it was supposed to be called, because a lot of people took the course then, of course, that was a sequence, History 1, History 2, and History 2 picked up with roughly Descartes, but goes all the way to now. So why we would have changed the name to Early Modern? But does that bother you? Were you really just hoping to stop at Hegel and not go on? Anybody? Because my emphasis really will be on, let's get to today. Because we don't have a third course that continues on beyond this one, other than specific topic courses. So when I was in college, I had a whole semester of ancient, and then a whole semester of medieval. They were great courses. I know a lot of people think, why would you study medieval philosophy? There's great stuff that happened during the medieval period. Then modern, and the modern ended with Kant, really. And then I went on to 19th century thought with Dr. Rayukas, which was absolutely fantastic. And the point at which, by the way, I finally was saved from my absolute turmoil, my philosophical, metaphysical turmoil, wondering, geez, how can any, because Rayukas had all the answers. And it was just absolutely great. He's dead now, but he passed them on to me. And I will do my best to pass all those answers on to you. If that makes sense. Then we had all the contemporary philosophy. We had existentialism as a separate course. I had all the science courses, so philosophy of science, philosophy of religion, philosophy of, you don't have science of philosophy. They don't do that. Although there is a sociology of philosophies. That's really interesting, actually, where Russell. Well, I didn't mean to actually go into the book, but here's the. So that's a really cool book. Unfortunately, it's also about 800 some pages, and it's not light reading. But there's some really fascinating stuff in there, even though it's a sociologist that studied the whole history of philosophy and the networks associated with it, the interaction between the various philosophers and how one group of philosophers were influenced by another and back and forth. It's absolutely fascinating stuff. So I highly recommend it if you have 28 hours a day and you're not doing anything else. But I have read it because I have 28 hours a day and nothing else to do. So read all the time, which is why I'm so robust, I suppose. It doesn't really go with jogging. You trip over curbs, especially on our campus. There's a lot of curbs. So I'm going to pick up really from about where we left off in the previous course, if you took it with me, and continue on from there. But I'm going to try to get all the way, even beyond Derrida. So, and by the way, reason I picked this book, I realize it starts off with everything in the first course. And this, it's because this way, if you're taking both courses, you just have the one text to buy instead of multiple books, which was the way we used to do it. Although they were all the same book, it's just that this one comes in 5 volumes if you want. And they're all expensive.
Yeah, that
So
makes
this
it
is
worse.
much cheaper than buying 3 for the one course, 2 for the, So that's why I have a book that covers more than glue. You can say, please bring your devices and food, except for alcohol. We're not allowed alcohol. If you have your gun with you, don't tell me and keep it hidden. And if it's a long gun, that's fine because the door sign tells you just can't use that one pistol. That's the only one you're not allowed to bring. And I'm fine with that. If you're
50 caliber sniper rifle.
that's legal, I guess. It's not on the door. And if you're upset, because you're losing the game, please don't shoot as many of your comrades as possible. That's a Florida thing. We don't do that in Alaska.
That's a Florida.
Except for Mountain Dew.
Dear God.
Sorry if my sense of humor offends you. That's what makes humor humorous, right? Unless you're a child. Have any questions so far? Am I weird enough? I know most of you. I have explanations for all of that. Remember, I was an Army linguist.
You're an Army linguist?
I was an Army linguist. I had studied Latin in high school, French in high school. In college I had lots more French, some German, just enough that I realized, hey, why would you pay to study German? All you have to do is speak English with a German accent and you're there.
Right.
Because it's that close. Han, Fus, it's like just whatever. And then, and Greek. I had a Koine Greek course for the New Testament. Terrible course. The professor was an Episcopal priest, and all he wanted to do was make sure we all knew that it was wine and not grape juice. Sorry. There were issues back then, However, but so I could still putz about in Greek, but it's not like I could say Kyrie eleison,
So you learned Greek in the Army?
No, that was all prior to joining the Army.
Oh, okay.
So when it came to joining the Army, because the Vietnam War was over, it was a volunteer force, they were paying people more, and everybody was getting out of it, and I thought, hey, that's the place to go. So I volunteered then, and volunteered for Russian. So they sent me to the Defense Language Institute,
Been there.
Monterey, Очень хорошо. Which language?
I tried to get Russian. They gave me Mandarin.
Well, the time is right for Mandarin Russian. The Russians are our friends.
Actually, it kind of swapped because they didn't want to teach anybody Russian when I went in 2007, and then now the school's overwhelmed.
The Russians are our friends. In fact, they're Trump's boss.
Right?
Well, they're a lot more kosher with Hillary.
Sorry, but from what I've read, it looks pretty accurate. And that shouldn't be bad, because after all, if we're free to vote, our own thoughts, look what we do to ourselves. This way, at least Putin will be saying, hey, no more of that. Okay. Who wants health care anyway? free trade. Who does that help? Not that millionaire, not that billionaire. Workers. That's what workers. Sorry. Actually neutral. I just love watching everything that happens. No, I did just finish the other day reading. I'm sorry, I do read. I apologize.
I do. You're apologizing for reading?
Snyder. It is. The Road to Unfreedom. You heard of it? I just finished it.
Was it good?
It was amazing. I don't know where he got all the information. A lot of footnoted stuff, but a lot of it just, so at this meeting, Trump, promised to do this. And Putin said, okay. No, по-русски, конечно. Actually, Putin speaks German and English very well. He was a spy in Berlin while I was there, which is kind of interesting.
Don't him and Merkel actually have a pretty good relationship because of that?
I think so, yeah.
Right? I mean, she's East German.
She's East German. Was a
So,
physicist, commie, that loves
they
to
were
do her
both
own
on the
laundry.
same side at a time.
Yeah. But this is fascinating. He's also a good historian, academic as well. A little slow doing his lectures if you ever watch him on YouTube. Have a very slow presentation style method. Okay. So, if you want an A, you've got it. All you have to do is just send me enough words. And the essays, the same as the other formats. I have 3 exams. They're already posted, test 1, test 2, test 3. And then the term paper, which same list as you probably saw last time. It's in here somewhere. How come it doesn't show up as a link? Well,
It's on
shoot.
the next word list, I think. Like in the next.
Oh, right there.
Oh, there it is. So I did add Roger Scruton, but you could add other people if you have a favorite out there. If you've already done one last semester or the first course, please don't pick the same one the second course. You should pick, because you should torture yourself. Do more work. It's good for you. Right? Suffering is good. So that's my Roman Catholic background.
I don't remember the one I did last time.
Didn't you do C.S. Lewis?
I'm not sure.
I forget. But my computer will remember.
Yeah, but I don't.
But I have.
You'll have to tell me
Do you
again,
keep-
John. It's
I
the
keep
same.
sure. I have student papers from '95.
Jesus.
Jesus was not in my class at the time.
Darn. That would have been.
Although I think it would have been good for him.
Probably.
We could have at least figured out which. I figured he spoke. Gosh, my mind is not working. Greek. Must have spoke Greek. Plus, he must have spoke. It begins with A, and it's the language from that area at the time. Aramaic.
Oh.
Aramaic and Hebrew. Because if he was a rabbi, he had to speak and read the Torah. So that's Hebrew. Aramaic. We've got some quotes, actually, that seem pretty clear that he's calling on Elias. No, I don't know if you're into that stuff or not. We don't cover Jesus in this course. So we'll mention him lots, though, because of course he doesn't go away. He's still very much a part of our culture, etc. But there's some good philosophers there. I keep adding to it. These are the living ones, because those are the ones I think you ought to be trying to familiarize yourself with, because it also keeps you abreast of the current issues that they're dealing with. We're not really worried about phlogiston anymore. So no one believes that heat is like a fluid that secretes from one element to another, and that's phlogiston, and that's how something gets hot. No, we don't believe that at all. It all has to do with microwaves. We have a microwave. Hot. Because you just stirred up the atoms. And so we don't think, so a lot of issues we still have, but the issues have changed. A lot of brain stuff. Patricia Churchland and her husband Paul Churchland, they're both philosophers of mind. Joseph Ratzinger, Pope Benedict XVI, eggs Benedict. That's the joke. He's no longer Pope, so he's eggs Benedict. It's a breakfast joke. But he's still there. He's still very influential. He was one of the main influences in Vatican II, if you're familiar with that. Hans Kung, his friend and enemy. But I also have Umberto Eco, who recently died, Peter Berger, who just died months ago, Michael Foucault, Edward Said, Vine Deloria, C.S. Lewis, Richard Rorty, John Rawls, Robert Nozick, Donald Dworkin, Hans Georg Gadamer. I know, you could find others too. So term paper, 3,000 words. And quiz questions, which I will ask each class, theoretically, to make sure you come. But of course, I will also post them on my blog. So if you don't, you can still answer them as if you were here. So if at some time, this actually happened, a student was being charged by the police for a crime, and he said, I couldn't have committed the crime because I was in class. Fortunately, the teacher had kept roll and actually was his alibi, because she did know that he had been, in fact, in class that evening, so he couldn't have been at the scene of the crime.
That's crazy.
That's cool.
So that at least has happened. But so if you come to me though, and all I've got is you've answered the email, but actually it's a small class. I'll remember who's here. It's not like 24 people. But yes, actually we're having class even though it's under the minimum.
Really?
But that's okay. I said fine, because that's always the case with this one. Because the history courses generally have fewer than like the intros and the logics and things like that. And if we didn't, then you wouldn't get the chance to take it. And it's a good course to take for your it satisfies several requirements all at once. So yeah. So any questions on how the course, why I'm weird, how we do the
I
course?
feel like we don't have time to get into that first one.
We don't have time. Why the weird
Well, you're a
thing? We don't
DLI
have time
grad.
to get into
You're
this.
DLI grad. We're all kind of.
Yeah, that's like, you know, I
I've met a
remember
few.
once in Hawaii, my last duty station, we had a major visiting from Beijing. We don't say Peking anymore. No one does.
No.
It's Beijing. But she was there escorting some Chinese officers who were on tour of our site.
Where were you at in Hawaii?
In Hawaii, Kunia.
Okay, I was at Kunia.
Yeah.
Okay, wow, that's how I lives.
Yeah, that was 91, 92,
Okay.
93.
So I was there like 2008 to 2012.
So did you know Snowden?
He reset my password once. I'm not a fan.
Sorry. I do think he should be shot on sight.
I concur.
If he's ever back. But that's me. So. Okay. So yeah. So I have lots of excuses for being weird. I'm expected to be weird. It's actually a requirement for the job. As you teach philosophy, you talk about, did I ask you this before? Does the earth go around the sun, or does the sun go
Yeah.
around the earth? Yes?
Yeah, you asked us that.
Have I asked you that? You're fresh into this fold, so what's your immediate answer to, does the earth go around the sun, or does the sun go around the earth?
Depends on who you talk to.
Whoa, you're avoiding the trap.
Yeah.
That's pretty brilliant. Are you a postmodernist already? Or this summer I read a relatively new biography of Galileo, and I was absolutely astounded because Pope, not Umber, what the heck, not Umberto. It's Umberto Eco's just totally screwed me up. Pope Urban the VIII was brilliant, and he was the Pope who was really good friends with Galileo. They had dinner, etc. And he kept saying, "Well, you don't. God could switch it at a moment's notice, you know. So you shouldn't pick one or the other, you know. For now, they were basically Aristotelian. The church had merged with Aristotelian philosophy. Prior to that, it had been Augustinian, and it was really kind of cemented with Aquinas, if you're familiar with that. That's when Albertus Magnus was his teacher, and Aquinas is an Aristotelian, and he basically resolves the issues so the church can accept Aristotle. That's like 1260 or so, although it took a while before it actually became the official dogma of the church. 1950. That's a little slow, you know. They're still arguing over whether or not evolution is. Trouble is, there's so many different kinds of evolution. Certainly evolution is correct, but what kind of evolution are you talking about? And if you're interested in that stuff, even though he's been dead now since 2005, I think, Stephen Jay Gould, I think, is one of the best explanations of all of that in his book. Oh, shoot. Sorry, my mind is going. What's it called? Stephen Jay Gould. And that's there it is. The structure of evolutionary theory. Again, about 900 pages. Huge tome. But he basically goes through all of the... Look, you could get some for $4.48. Hardcover, $4.48. That's pretty cheap. Although I think we have it in the library. So. But he goes through all of the scientists fighting over what kind of evolution there could be. And there's like 50 different varieties. So when you get through it, you realize, it's not a matter of, is evolution true? It's what the heck kind of evolutionary theory predicts or describes things more accurately? And there are really so many different kinds of issues. So the church is, I think, really, in a sense, right to say, you shouldn't come down and say that this is absolutely the case. You should leave it open. It's ambiguous. You pick, this is true, and then 10 years later you're embarrassed when you realize, yes, Irish priests were doing things they shouldn't have. Sorry. I'm still embarrassed about that whole thing. I'm still embarrassed of what happened all those years I grew up and was a student at St. Cyril of Alexandria Grammar School, and then discovered many years later that St. Cyril was the Bishop of Alexandria that allowed his Catholics in a mob to kill Hypatia, who is considered to be one of the smartest women that ever lived. So that's horrifying. And they killed her by scraping her skin off with seashells and leaving her to lie in the sun. And he's a saint.
Yeah, that's messed up.
This is terrible. However, well, back to Galileo and the whole issue over the Earth going around the sun and the sun going around the Earth, or other models. So we've really come today to the point where we use Stephen Hawking. Model-dependent realism. This is actually a pretty good Wikipedia article on it, by the way. The book that they're associating it with is Hawking and Mladenov, The Grand Design, which is more of a nice, big, thick, but spaced out and lots of pictures kind of book. Remember how Hawking was just absolutely astounded. The Brief History of Time became like a bestseller. Physics books are not supposed to do that. And he became famous. Even before he was already in his chair by then. However, so model-dependent realism recognizes really a very Kantian kind of point, and that is that our human senses arrange the way we perceive things. And so the way we perceive things are human modeled based perception, not the way things are in themselves. They're always the way they are to us, not the way they are in themselves apart from any humans perceiving it. Right? And since that's the case, then we're imposing kind of a structure on the way we perceive things, and so a lot of what we're describing is really how our psychology arranges our experience. And that was kind of the Copernican revolution, not associated with Copernicus, but what Kant called his own revolution, which I think was just dumb, because it's really just the opposite of Copernicus. It's really weird. But Kant called it that. It's like a Copernican revolution. And I realized that, hey, we are not actually seeing things as they are. We're seeing them as our senses perceive them and structure them. And then the question was, how does that happen? And we're still finding that out. And we have folks like this. This is... So Eric Kandel, Nobel Prize winner for his experiments on mice brains and how they see. Amazing. So there's a book that really details. It's already years old, 2012, but this is at the time. By the way, that's the Woman in Gold. It's the painting that was stolen by the Nazis from the Jewish family in Vienna, and Vienna got it back, and the family that had been decimated, except for the one woman, right, has sued Austria to get it back, and they did win, and they got it back. And Austria was all upset. Why don't you let us still, it's our prized possession. She said, no, you Nazis, and took it. You know, so it's in New York, I think, now. So that's kind of interesting. Some of my friends have seen it. I don't think I've ever seen the actual painting. If I did, I went, you know, because I don't really get it. It's not that. It's real gold that you use to paint it in this kind of. But the book is about the age of insight, Insicht, so that you're realizing we're learning a lot about our human psychology when we're doing science about the way the world is. So we're at the point where we realize, you know, we're having to understand how we see, and talks about how your eye has basically a computer that determines what your eye is going to focus on. So that as, you know, the beautiful blonde woman, shapely, walks by, your eyes are not just picking up all of the light coming into your eye. They're, so I should have said brunette. Sorry, you know. So, I don't. You know, whatever. Okay, it's an apple. So we're
Cool.
an apple. You know, I'm looking at the apple. You know, whatever you're
Cool,
focusing
it's an
on.
apple. Where are we going with this?
Your eyes are
You're not looking at everything and seeing everything. You're
You have a focal point?
not just that. You're predetermining what you should focus on ahead of time, based on your eye being trained what you think is important, which comes from your culture. So depending on your culture, you'll see things differently. Whoa. So it's not just our physical human nature that determines how we perceive things. It's also our cultural traditions, and of course your family traditions and your language. How your language breaks up the world. Whoa. You know, some languages don't have the verb to be, which means they can't do basic Western logic, which is incredible. You know, so when you're dealing with, say, a Chinese contract, and they say this is the case, and you're like, you can't say this is the case. You don't have that capability in Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
Unless they've learned it, which, you know, I understand that that's kind of an issue, but when I've asked, it was actually a Beijing Chinese philosopher who gave us a lecture and said that Chinese-speaking people cannot do Western metaphysics because they don't have the verb to be. So you cannot say all horses are animals. You can say horses, animals. You can't say all horses are animals. And if a true statement is a statement that fits one of the four Aristotelian statement types, all S's P's, no S's P, some S's P, some S's not P, the Chinese can't make true statements. Or false ones. They're incapable of true false statements, according to the Western tradition of what true false statements are. And I'm not even talking about Trump. You know, I've listened to a lot of that discourse, and a lot of people say, he lied 6 times today. And I look at them and I realize their opinion. When you're giving an opinion, an interpretation, you cannot tell the truth or lie. It's your opinion. It's an interpretation. Interpretations cannot be true or false. And if what we mean by a lie is that you're deliberately speaking what you know to be false, to mislead people, then that's not a lie. You're just disagreeing with his opinion and you want to call it a lie, and that's just mean.
Deceptive.
That's just as deceptive or more so. So,
Because every conspiracy needs a bigger conspiracy.
People love conspiracy theories.
Right.
We love theories. We're hungry for an explanation of something. And that gets into a whole lot of reason why we're satisfied or not, etc. So this is really interesting. But so model-dependent realism, when we're looking at even a theory like the Earth going around the Sun going around the Earth, both of those are true, although you do have to fix the model. So remember they thought that all the planets go around the Earth. No, you have to fix that. The correct one from that modeling perspective is the Tychonic model. Or system. Is that big enough for you to see? You can't see the map. What's this one? That's interesting. Here's the Ptolemaic. That's wrong. You can't have everything going around the Earth. The Copernican system is wrong too because it's circles. Remember that it has to be changed to an ellipse rather than a circle. Tychonic system, that's essentially the mirror image of the heliocentric system. So that would be the model that works as a good mirror image of the heliocentric system. But even the heliocentric system is just a useful tool, but when you have the sun traveling at, 450 kilometers per second towards Orion, we're not all going in a circle, except in a bigger circle that takes 250 million years before we see the same star patterns again. And actually the stars are moving too, so I don't know that they would all be in the same patterns. But that gets into really incredible questions about for how long have human beings on the Earth been familiar with all of these patterns? Because all these different landmarks, like the Mayan temples, apparently are built to reflect all kinds of interesting aspects of the universe that, well, they're all dead, so we can't ask them, were you really trying to say this? Does Stonehenge really enable you to predict all these kinds of things? We can't really ask, but we can model it with computers and say, hey, you know what, it's this. It shows the 25,000 year wobble, of the Earth. Can you believe it? Iceland has one too, except it's even bigger than Stonehenge, because you can only see it if you're in a plane. There's thousands of those actually. They're all over the place. Little Stonehenges all over the place. Henge, by the way, means a hinge, right? It's not my fault. So that's fun. So yeah, plus we also have the model that nothing moves, because we were talking about frozen in time. That's chapter 9. And am I annoying you to death, or is this interesting? So that's Brian Greene. And that's not the Frozen World, but not the Elegant Universe was an earlier book. The Hidden Reality is the more recent one, but there's another one called is elegant fabric of the cosmos. I think it's chapter 9. Where he gives the metaphor of the frozen river, and if you want to look at a particular time, you like slice the river and say this is now, right? But the whole frozen river is actually there throughout all time and space, because all of time exists at once. We're perceiving the here and now because our consciousness is moving through our model of time. You ever heard this? So this is Brian Greene. He's cool. He's got lots of great YouTubes. Uses really fancy special effects that I don't think he's the one that makes them, but they're on YouTube. He's on like one of the science folks. Fascinating. Very easy to read. So he's the kind of physicist that sells books. You don't sell books if you write a book that only physicists can read. So that's,
You gotta have pictures.
pardon?
You gotta have pictures.
Gotta have pictures. Yeah, I'm picturing that frozen river. I don't know. Do they have that image? It should have come right up, but I don't see it. I don't see it. But it's in the book where he talks about. So that's still another model, which apparently, according to physicists like Brian Greene, is true. So all time exists at once. So we've already this moment was there. It was already there. It still is there.
It's gone.
Well, it's still there. We
It's still-
can't
yeah.
we can't figure out how to get back to it. But our minds are quantum computers, which means that we can go in and out of the local space, so that when I remember what my mom was saying to me the last time I saw her, my mind is actually traveling back into time to my mind at the time that happened, and that's what enables me to do that. The reason I can do that is because my mind state is still there at that point in time. Which, by the way, explains to me why my concept of soul works, because my soul is my consciousness throughout all of that time, throughout my existence in time and space, and every one of those moments is actually still there.
Too bad you couldn't ask yourself, would that be a good idea before I do it?
You can. Some people do.
Yeah.
And that's because they have less myelin sheaths on their neurons, so they're able to be more free in connecting to the future and recognizing, hey, this would be a bad idea. So some people have that ability. Some people are so free that we consider them psychotic, and we put them on medicines to protect them from themselves.
A little padded roots.
And you can take your own medications in order to open your mind up to all those experiences, but I don't recommend it. A lot of people use LDS, to do that.
Yeah.
LSD.
I was like, what's
Not the church.
Not
Not
the
the
Latter
church.
Day Saints.
Always get that one. That was actually Captain Kirk's fault.
Yeah.
You know where I mean? From the movie, The Journey Home, where they go back into time to rescue 2 whales and bring them into the future. And they're sitting on the bus talking to the biologist, the marine biologist, and he's got to explain why Spock just called him Admiral, and he says he did too much LDS in college. So that's actually in a movie.
That's funny.
That's not my joke. I steal it from the movie. There's nothing in this that I should be ashamed of. It's lemonade. Just so you know. Okay. Well, I was planning on bringing the book Galileo to class, next class, and reading some sections of it that I just thought were absolutely astounding, where he and the Pope were at it over his publication and everything. And you know, because I mean, when you think about Galileo, what's your sense that Galileo had discovered a fact of the cosmos, and the church refused to let him publish? He published anyway, so the church made him recant, and he was locked in his house, basically, which was a mansion. And by then he was already blind. By the way, if you have a telescope, do not stare at the sun with it. Just thinking about it makes my eyes get all blurry. It would eventually hurt so that he would then switch to the other eye.
It would eventually hurt. Oh my god. Mild pain, it's fine.
More like instantaneous.
Well, he discovered sunspots.
Took one for the team.
He discovered them because he started seeing them everywhere.
Yeah, no, really.
I would imagine so, you know. And you know, he made these telescopes and passed them around to people that disagreed with him. And, you know, they looked at things. The main things they were trying to look at was the moon. Does the moon have valleys and mountains and spas and beaches and rivers? And no.
What's greater?
Yeah. So, you know, so that's, you know, some people could see through the telescope better than others. One of the things they realize now was that, well, his eyes were not perfect, and he was making them for his eyes, so someone else whose eyes were different than his wouldn't see the same thing through the telescope that he saw. But they were still a great gift, and everybody, you know, all the nobles wanted it and stuff. He was also trying to give a lot of them to Jesuits, because they were the ones that were mostly the Vatican scientists that were against his theory. Not all of them. Some of them were for it. So, you know, so it was so complex, so interesting, that whole idea that Galileo good, church bad, that's just dumb, basically, in retrospect. And it's great to read a book like that and come across really the idea that Galileo was like kind of the dumb oaf, good mathematician, but the dumb one that didn't realize the nuances of church politics. And the Pope did, and basically told him, okay, so put this change, this change, this change, this change, and we'll publish it, fine. And he ended up publishing it without those changes, and of course that got him into trouble with his friend Pope Urban VIII, etc. It's all fascinating. So I'll bring that book next class and read some of that stuff, and I think it's fascinating. In retrospect, Pope Urban had a point of view which was essentially the same as Stephen Hawking's model-dependent realism. Not the same, because he's clearly allowing the theological theory to dictate. But there's what other reason? What reason would you say? Today we wouldn't say that there is a model that is the way things are. Instead, we have all these different models which enable us to predict things, to understand things in different ways about the way things are. But there's always more models that you can come up with, and no model will ever be actually the way things are. There's lots of ways things are. So that's just, so you see, this is modern period, this leads into the modern period, yet at the same time you can see today, this is, a totally different issue for us, because it gets into the whole question about isn't there some way things really are? Aren't there facts, right? We get into this, whole business of truthiness and facts, and what is a fact? Well, it turns out that our best model on truth and facts is that we vote on it. It's what we all agree is the case. But guess what? 10 years from now, we might not have the same votes. And the truth changes. And that's like really irritating to conservatives. Right? And for good reason. You feel like, well, wait a minute. This has to be a fact. Does this sound like fun? So I would really like the course to be as contemporarily relevant as possible. But of course we do cover Descartes. Descartes is important. And up. There is a traditional sequence of individuals that gave us this kind of progress. And we're pretty clear on what the significance was in each of these steps. And of course, unless you study philosophy, you really don't get that significance. So that's the plan, anyway, to cover all of that stuff, at least the major things. And it's like if you're Dr. Peter Strawson, Sir Peter Strawson, who I got to listen to at the University of Pennsylvania for an hour, referred to the weak fish principle. Stay as close to the surface as possible. So on the one hand, you cover the surface. This is Descartes, Hobbes, Spinoza, Locke, Berkeley, Leibniz, Kant, Hume. And you just go through those and you get, okay, so what's the connection? What's the dots here? What would Russell Collins say in the Sociology of Philosophies was the major changes here? How did we get to the way we are today? So we go through those. But then you could always go diving down into Leibniz. How deep can you go? There's still translating stuff from Leibniz. There's still translating stuff from St. Augustine. There's still a chance that we might find more Aristotle stuff, because they're digging up tombs all over the Middle East, and they wrapped bodies in trash paper, and when you unwrap the trash paper, you just, wow, look at what we've got here. Fantastic stuff.
Wait, like the bodies are wrapped in trash paper? Are you saying bodies?
Mummies.
Yeah.
They
Wrapped
wrap them in paper.
And like Aristotle's next piece is like
What paper did they wrap them in?
my
God. When you look at
Jesus Christ.
that
Just wrapping in
too.
the phonies,
Yeah.
man.
That is shocking.
A lot of people couldn't afford to find linens, so they would use whatever they could find.
And if you no longer believe it's true, or if it's, against the church or whatever, you're not theoretically supposed to read it anyway. So it's trash paper.
Well, trash like
Like
letters.
yeah.
So absolutely fascinating. They had slaves all along the Nile, and the one slave owner writes to a friend of his down the Nile, which is weird because that's up for us, right? because the slaves would escape that way. Same way Moses, took the people out, which is slaves also. So slaves, my slave so-and-so escaped. He's probably heading your way. Please keep an eye out for him. And if you find him, I'd love to have him returned because he's a really good slave. By the way, how's your family? Have you had a good summer? Etc. That's 3,000 years old. On trash paper that someone found on a mummy that they unwrapped. In perfectly good English. No, not. Obviously, you're. Well, that's one way you can tell how old it is. And I keep calling it paper, but it's obviously papyrus. Or they made it out of reeds, which is why Aquinas on his deathbed, it's so much reeds, right? So much hay or grass, whatever is the word he used. Because all the stuff he wrote was on grass, so pressed grass, right? That became. So if Aquinas is upset that it's grass, that's not marijuana. That's he was having a kind of end-of-life ecstasy, but it wasn't that kind. The convent didn't have that stuff. No one had that stuff, I guess. So we go to 12:45, is correct?
Correct.
So do you have any questions for me? Then I can ask you the quiz question today. So I don't want to ask, does the earth go around the sun, or does, because we've already discussed that. I don't want to ask the 10 Commandments, because most of you already done that.
Oh no.
How many of you read the little piece about Pico Mirandola that I posted? Anybody? Nobody. Okay. But that's here. Well, let me ask this. When did the Gutenberg press begin? When were books suddenly available much cheaper than they had ever been? And how significant do you think that was for the modern period? It's really a muddy question, isn't it?
Yeah, that was really nuts.
I suppose what I'm thinking, though, is that the stuff that Galileo was involved with, and books are not new, essentially, with Galileo, but clearly part of the problem between Galileo and the church was that the books that he's writing are published and they spread, and the church can't stop it. Remember, the same thing happened with Martin Luther, the Reformation, right? These have to be recalled. We want every one of them. Sorry, they've already been published, and everybody in France, Sweden, they all have them. What? So the one church hierarchy is still used to the idea that you can't get a hold of a book unless you pay lots of money to have it copied. But now we've got a culture where hundreds of copies of the book are, here, have one. Pamphlets for free. And so everybody who can read, even in German, right, gets to read these things. and then start thinking on their own instead of just having to listen to the hierarchy. So of course this is part of the switch into the modern period. And Mirandola is an example of this. He's publishing. The church is trying to catch up on what he's doing and giving him grief because, wait a minute, a lot of the stuff you're talking, Kabbalah, he's into the Kabbalah, the Jewish texts, analysis of the Torah in depth. A lot of it's magic. Part of magic the church didn't like, but others were fascinated with. Sir Isaac Newton was into magic. Where does chemistry begin, and where does alchemist, alchemistry, whatever you call it. Well, that sounds like chemistry, doesn't it? Alchemy, where does, so at some point, where you're trying to turn lead into gold, which, by the way, is the metaphor that J.K. Rowling uses for Harry, which, if you notice, the cover of book 7 has the gold sunrise right when Harry kills Voldemort, because that's when his soul becomes gold, Harry's. So he's the lead, starting in book 1, that has become gold, thanks to Rubius, which is red, Hagrid, Albus, which is white, Dumbledore,
Whoa.
and Sirius black. So the 3 metals that they use to transform lead to black is red, white, and black. It's not my fault. It's just, it's cool. She was sly.
She's brilliant. It's brilliant.
She had a double first in French in classics. So the question, that should be fun. Once they started publishing books, they were still expensive by our standards. And I still have a college textbook from 1970 that I paid $1.65 for. My daughter just bought a statistics textbook that was $237. And that's not even close to the most expensive book our house ever paid, because my son bought a lump of a thing years ago for engineering that was 700 something, I forget. He said the teacher never used it. And changed it the next year so that you couldn't sell it. So we actually used it as a doorstep in the house. Ceremonial doorstep.
As long as it's used for something, right?
I never opened the cover. I have some books that I'm fond. I paid 300 something for the total collection of Hegel's works, and I have opened them.
How's that?
Very difficult.
Yeah.
But I have all the works in English too, some in multiple translations. 2 new translations just came out on the phenomenology. One by Stephen Pinkard, who he's very good. But that's really dumb. When you live in a house that doesn't grow, and you keep getting books, you eventually get to the point where you have to live outside in a tent and visit your library every once in a while. My one daughter says as soon as I die, she's just going to throw everything out. That's pretty bad. But I understand.
Might want to leave it in your will. Make sure you check eBay on the value before you throw it out.
Send them to the Philippines. Maybe
Yeah.
villages that don't have the internet can use it.
Yeah.
Oh well, so I guess that's it for today, unless you have questions.
Do those.
I didn't tell any really bad jokes today, did I?
No.
Lois?
How's the baby?
Growling.
That happened. Chances are you're feeding the child.
Every now and again.
That does it. That does it. All of ours are taller than us. Even our 7-month-old puppy,
Aw. What kind of
Saint Bernard.
Oh my goodness.
Saint
Name?
Bernard puppy. In fact,
Do you have pictures?
I have scars.
Oh, I thought you were gonna like pull out your phone and show us pictures.
That's a paw print I got this morning. Actually, it was
That's totally fine. Totally acceptable.
Thank you.
have a good day. Be safe.
I have a Bernese Mountain Dog at home. And he got my dad the other day and just like straight down the face. And like just
Burmese are so pretty.
And it's loving.
yeah,
That's the
yeah.
thing.
He
It's
just
I love you.
I'm trying to give you a big hug.
You're also blinding me, but that's
You
fine.
might punch me in the face while I'm doing it.
Oh, or little puppy nips.
Mm.
Oh. They're actually like bites.
They are. They feel like it.
Evelyn.
Evelyn.
Yes.
Oh,
That's okay.
thank
it's all
you.
good. Yes.
I mental defect. You know, it's
That's okay. Totally. I forgot I was taking your class until today, so totally fine.
if you find anyone else out there who wants a wonderful class where they get an easy A and get to talk
Why
about
do you
this
think
kind
I
of
think
stuff.
I was like, after the last semester, I was like, yes, please. I looked. I was like, I have to take another one of these classes because it's fun. You actually learn something, and it's an easy A. What more could you want?
Free.
Free
Yeah,
would be
That,
great.
would be
that
good.
would be
That would be
awesome.
awesome.
Nice. That would
Free.
also. I
I'm
didn't
for
realize.
free. You know,
I didn't realize there was a book. I hope that's not on, but it probably is. So it's
It's-
like taking a picture of me.
there.
I didn't realize there was a book.
If not all of the articles are on the web for free,
Really? Okay. Well,
even though some of them should.
how much was this? Does anyone know? Does
Only
anyone?
about
Have...
$80, but
Oh,
yes.
that's oh, fine. It's worth having it.
I got
Well-
mine,
It's all the main.
About half of them.
Yeah, I'll probably just go on Amazon, honestly.
I've been using it since. Well, it's like the 5th edition, 6th.
I kept the last book because I actually enjoyed it and had good articles in it. I didn't want to get rid of it because we didn't read everything. So,
I did change the book for my intro class
well, I'm not taking it again.
because
so.
it's if you use the same book for all 3 of them, then just covering the same material slower in one class and faster in another.
That's fair.
People aren't going to take both.
Makes sense. I have a question.
Yes.
So there are a couple days this semester that I know I'll be missing.
That's
And-
one reason why I try to do this,
Okay.
because you can miss classes, and I try to make it. Yeah, see, like it.